Lucy and Pat are now Mr. and Mrs. Patrick John Nugent. The president formally surrendered his daughter to her new husband less than an hour ago at the Shrine of the Immaculate Conception, and the marriage ceremony itself ended at 12:42 Eastern Daylight Time. Since then, the newly married couple have been participating in the high nuptial mass. It has been a colorful, splendid, and magnificent occasion. Although in today's mid-80s temperature, some of the formally dressed members of the wedding party may be glad it's over. Still, it's an occasion no one will forget.
Ceremony itself is over, but I hope you and the other male observers and participants of the wedding don't think that's it. It may be the most important part, but there are still formal pictures of the bridal party to be taken, standing in or passing through the receiving line of the White House, toasts to be toasted, dances to be danced, and cake to be either eaten or slept on. That choice will depend on the degree of your hunger and or sentimentality. But the day that we're calling Lucy's Day is far from over. We had a couple of tips about what had happened during the ceremony. Liz Carpenter, Mrs. Johnson's secretary, ran downstairs and said that when Lucy and her father walked down the aisle, when he surrendered her to Pat, she turned around to her father and gave him a little pat, as though she was saying goodbye to him. And then when
You mean not a little pat, but a little tap on the cheek.
You're paying attention, and I'm proud of you. When they were standing for the ceremony, or just before the ceremony, Lucy was so nervous that she was visibly shaking. And she had held her little firm chin out, though, and she was looking up at the magnificent mosaic of Christ. Pat was so moved that he took out a handkerchief and wiped away some real tears during the ceremony. And then also, Bob, very like the two of them, I think, when it came time for their responses, Pat could hardly be heard. His voice, in fact, couldn't be heard. You could see his lips move. But Lucy's voice came through loud and clear.
Isn't that usually the way, as I recall, most of the weddings I've attended, the woman somehow manages to get the words out beautifully, and the man seems to be somewhat, well, I don't want to say reluctant, but he's quiet about the whole thing.
It's just what we've been saying all along. It's Lucy's Day.
Betty, during the near frantic activities of the past week, Lucy and Pat did manage to squeeze in time for an interview. Let's listen to it.
Lucy, I think you've said at one time or another that this was not love at first sight. Could you tell us what did happen on that first sight or first
I
date?
don't mean that in a derogatory but the situation was so difficult, I can't imagine it. Under
KY.
a similar situation, how it could ever
Yes,
been
we
love
give him
at
a
first
crab.
sight.
Pickup of the year.
Patrick met me here in
Ostrichville
Washington,
Repute,
and then
Steve
we,
Reeves.
both attended,
Well, he sure wishes he could.
For a weekend, and
Yeah.
it was a very
Well, I really think he's
busy weekend, a very hurried weekend, and so we either got along
And to
very
other people,
easily,
and
we
he's
could have
very
gotten in each
violent
other's
to his
nerves, and we got along very easily, and that's, I guess, how it all started.
He's very false, like
Wasn't love at
Gerard.
first sight because Lucy had another date that night, which is self-explanatory in itself.
Pat, those of us who have business dealings with your
so are
future
you.
father-in-law
Well, I hope
sometimes
they're
find him
getting
a little
nicer, because I don't think
formidable. Has that been a problem for you?
Like I just
For
hope
instance,
this
the
conversation
traditional
is gonna be
asking
on
for a girl's
television,
hand, how does that go when you have to ask the president?
Well, then be
It
cool.
was
You're
the same as it were for any other girl. It wasn't difficult. I was nervous. I told you I wasn't nervous, I'd be lying. Is it? No, but it went very well, and everything worked out just fine.
We'd gone down to Texas, and there had been reports that we'd gone down there specifically to ask him to talk to him about it. And we had no intention of doing so. And if we had, it would have been a difficult way to do it under, because when the whole world was saying we were going to do it, it makes everybody a little bit on edge and a little bit more nervous and a little bit more awkward situation. So we decided that that was not the best time, and we came back and we went about our business and did the best of the work and the school and whatever responsibilities we had at the time. And a few weeks later, Daddy came back and called us in and said, well, what's this I've been reading about in the newspapers? And Patrick sat down and we all talked to him, and here we are.
Lucy, could you tell us about the house that you and Gerard are going to live with when you go to school down in Austin?
Well, it's a lovely place. For me, it's like a dream house, possibly, because it is my first house, and I think a home, any place with Patrick would be a dream house to me. I described it in the past as a kind of a house that you dream of when you're a little girl looking around in your mother's high heels and dreaming of the day that the man on the white stallion is going to come off and take you into Never Never Land. But it definitely has its practical aspects, and since age 6 I've learned about closet space and places to keep linens and cupboard space and things of this nature, and it's adequate for us, and yet it's not above our heads.
That's a question, of course, that people are interested in. I think you've been quoted, Pat, as saying you're going to live on your paycheck. This is before you decided to go back to school. How did that affect this decision or this wish?
Well, it really doesn't affect it at all, since I have managed to put away $1 and we'll be fine for a year or so.
There's one question that the law says I have to ask in this kind of an interview. How big a family do you want, Luci?
Well, we'd like whatever the good Lord chooses to give us.
Is there any argument about that on your side, Pat?
No, sir, there isn't. I can't argue with the Lord.
Luci, I think you've been quoted as saying you're going to name your first child